Hello everyone, this is Salar and you're welcome back to the Smart Code. You're watching the second part on common HTML and CSS mistakes made by students or beginners. So just like before, we will continue analyze the mistakes one by one and I will show you on screen examples. So let's come straight to the point and look at the mistake number 5. Mistake number 5 is about browser defaults. The browser defaults are actually default CSS browser values for all the HTML elements. That simply means almost every HTML element has some kind of CSS attached to it. For example, look at the HTML on the screen. We have h1 element, paragraph, and an order list. Let me even code an anchor element. Right, so I only have HTML in my document. Let's now render this page in the browser and check the default CSS. So here's the page. Now open the dev tool. So here we have the document and I will select the body first. Down there you see the box model and here we have something looks like CSS. As you see, there are two CSS properties applied to the body. This CSS is actually default to the body and you can clearly see the body has applied a margin of 8 pixels around it. Let me now take the h1 element and here you see a bunch of CSS properties for the h1 element. The font size, margins, and font weight. And you see the top and bottom margin to the h1 element. The paragraph also has some defaults, the UL element, and the anchor element, right? So the CSS is already there. Now the question is, what is wrong with the browser defaults? And the answer of that question is every browser has its own default CSS for HTML elements. And that default CSS is not same in each and every browser. You can also check it out by your own. Just render a simple HTML page in different browser and study the default with the help of DevTool. Now, if you don't reset the defaults and rely on them, then your website will look different across various browsers because the browser defaults such as margins, paddings, line heights, line spacing, and other attributes are inconsistent across the browsers. So if you want to develop a website which interpreted consistently by all the browsers, then you must reset browser defaults. In real projects, some special CSS files are used to reset the browser defaults. For example, the most commonly used file is normalize.css. Reset or resetter.css can also be used. And these files are easily available on the internet. So we use normalize.css to reset the defaults and to make our website consistent across the browsers. But at the time when you're learning HTML, CSS properties, and layout techniques such as float, flex, and grid, you don't need to use normalize.css. You will only perform a very basic reset of padding and margin. So whenever you start coding in CSS, so at the top of your CSS file, you will code a universal selector and inside it, you will code only two properties, margin 0 and padding 0. That's it. This reset is necessary. If you do so, you can better understand CSS properties and layout techniques. Now, if I refresh the page, you will see the difference. You see all the defaults, margin and paddings are gone. The body previously had unwanted margin of 8 pixels around it and now it is gone. As you can see in the box model, there is no margin. So remember these two properties. What I have noticed, students don't take it seriously and face strange alignment problems, right? So that was the mistake number 5 when you start writing the CSS and don't reset the browser defaults. Let's now move on to the mistake number 6. The mistake number 6 is you don't set box sizing property to bar box. Box sizing property determines how the total width and the height of an element is calculated. I won't talk many details about the box sizing property because I've already done a very detailed tutorial on that. So if you don't know what box sizing is and how it calculates the size of the box, then I would recommend my tutorial that you can easily find on my channel, right? Now, you can assign two values to the box sizing property, the content box and the border box. The content box is the browser default. So the box sizing is always set to the content box by default. And content box is problematic because the padding and the border is added to the final rendered size of the element. Rendered size means the size that you see in the browser. Let's try to figure it out with the help of the example. You see, I have two different divs and they are called box 1 and box 2. And in the CSS, they have applied the same width and the height, 200 into 200 pixels. But they have different colors. Box 1 color is coral, box 2 color is brown, so that we can easily differentiate them in the browser. And so you see them in the browser, box 1 and box 2. Now keep in mind what I said earlier. Box sizing is set to content box by default. And in content box, the padding and the border is added to the rendered size of the element. So I am going to apply a padding of 20 pixels only to the first box, right? And now we need to refresh the page to find out what happens to the box 1. And here you see the size of the box is changed. The padding that we applied is added to the actual rendered size of the box. So as you can see, if you continue to work with the box sizing property set to the content box, you will face such inconsistencies in your layout. So instead of content box, we always set box sizing property to border box and we code it in a universal selector. So at the top of your CSS file, you will create a universal selector and you will simply set the box sizing to border box. That's it. And you remember previous mistakes? Reset browser defaults. So at the same time, we can reset margin and padding also. So this is something you will always code in your CSS file and it will save you from a lot of troubles. And don't forget to watch the box sizing tutorial to get to know more about this property. Now, if I refresh the page, I will get my layout back. So in border box, the padding and the border are not included in the rendered size. They are actually accommodated inside the box, right? So that was the mistake number 6. Let's now move on to the mistake number 7. The mistake number 7 is some beginners intentionally or unintentionally set fixed block height without testing the layout for content overflow. So when you code the fixed height to the block, you will always check your site layout for content overflow at the time you are developing as well as the modification and enhancement in the future. Let's say we have a paragraph as you can see on the screen and I give it a width of 300 pixels and give it also a background color to make it prominent in the browser. In the browser, you can see we have a paragraph block and the width is set to 300 pixels. So as we cut down the width, you see the box expanded itself vertically to accommodate the content. And this behavior is because of the height property of the block elements is always set to auto by default. Let's say if I put some more content in the paragraph, the height will increase as it is set to auto. And here you see the height is adjusting itself all the time. Let's say you develop a layout where you apply fixed height to the block. For example, 500 pixels. As you can see, the height is now fixed. And now the block won't adjust its height in accordance to the content you placed in it. And if the provided content doesn't fit inside the block, it will break the boundaries and so the layout. For example, in the future, you want to put some more text on your website. So in our HTML, I put more text, let's say 400 words. Now you will see the content overflow as I refresh the page and you see the overflow right here. Okay, so if you apply fixed height to the block, you will always check for content overflow. But there is another solution that you can go for. Let me first remove the extra text. So the solution is instead of using the height property, you can use minimum height property. So the minimum height is set to 500 pixels. In the browser, you will see the same layout. The height is set to 500 pixels, but this is the minimum height. As soon as you put more content in the block that goes beyond the bottom boundary, the block will increase its height to accommodate the content and there will be no content overflow. For example, we put again 400 words and so we refresh the page and here you see there is no content overflow, right? So the minimum height can be a better option if you don't know the amount of content. Otherwise, you will always check for the content overflow to the fixed height blocks, right? So that was the mistake number 7. So let's stop here because I don't like to make longer videos. We are not done yet. There are some more mistakes in my list and I will definitely talk about them in the part 3. So I will see you in the part number 3. Don't forget to give me your response and do subscribe the channel. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.